the topic which is projected there, the predicaments of parents of children with intellectual disabilities. In my introduction, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the trend of education globally, as we all know, is pointing towards inclusion of children who in the past were excluded or were denied education. A wide range of research has been conducted on the opinions and experiences of various key stakeholders on inclusive education. That's teachers, principals, and other important stakeholders. And generally, the stakeholders value this new concept of inclusive education. There are common concerns, however, that have been raised, even though it has been embraced, that have been raised about the feasibility of inclusive education. Now, the voice of the parents about the inclusion of their children is also very critical, but especially the parents of children with disabilities. So this part of research in the context of Botswana is missing. In this particular study, I would like us to understand that inclusive education means different things to different contexts. In other words, inclusion or inclusive education, as they will be used interchangeably in this presentation, is understood differently in different countries. Now, in this study, this is how I would want us to understand inclusive education. It refers to learners with disabilities learning alongside their peers without disabilities in regular education classrooms and being provided with the necessary support services while they are in those regular classrooms. I would like to share with you the practices of inclusive education in the context of Botswana. What is actually happening in terms of inclusion? Botswana has taken many different approaches to educate children with various types of disabilities. For example, we have, before I go into those examples, I want us to appreciate the fact that in our context, the context of Botswana, priority or more concern is focusing on 4 levels of disabilities, which are learning disabilities, visual impairment, hearing impairment, and intellectual disabilities. So I'm going to talk about the practices of inclusion as pertaining to those 4 areas. Those with learning disabilities, LD, in terms of the practices of inclusion, they directly go into the regular education classrooms without necessarily having to be assessed. And those with visual impairment and those with HI, hearing impairment, are also included in the regular education classrooms, but we are using a slightly different approach of a pull-out system. However, this group of learners, VI and HI, some of them, their provisions can be found in the special schools. Those who have not been able to be admitted into the regular classrooms find themselves in the special schools. Learners with VI and those with HI are taught by regular education teachers, and they pursue a regular education curricula with some accommodations and modifications to make them, to help them to perform at par with their peers without disabilities. Thus, when you look at these 2 groups and the very first group, their chances of progress to higher levels of education are maximized. Now, when we look at the last group of learners, which is learners with intellectual disabilities, who are the main concern of this particular study, they receive their education in some specialized, separate special units within the regular schools. And they are taught by special education teachers. These are teachers who have been trained to teach learners of this type of disability. They also pursue a completely different curriculum from the ones that is being pursued by their counterparts. That's to say that their chances of advancing to the next level of education are minimal and nil for higher levels of education. It therefore remains elusive as to what parents of learners in these special units, learners with ID, what they say about the education approach that best suits their children. So this study intends to tap into that area. The main purpose of this study is to investigate the opinions of one of the key stakeholders, that is parents, as the appraisal of the form of educational approach suitable for their children is very, very critical. The literature reveals a number of general views and assumptions regarding the placement of the place of parents in relation to their children's schooling. Some include the fact that parents know their children best, that parent involvement in their children's education is important, and that collaboration between parents and teachers brings positive outcomes. Parental support and involvement is particularly essential for the effective implementation of inclusive education. Studies show that there are those parents who support separate specialized services and those who support inclusion for various reasons. For example, those who support separate provisions indicate that there is safety in those specialized services, the resources are available, and also there is fear of possible isolation. And again, the regular education teachers are seen to not have the necessary skills and knowledge to assist learners with disabilities. Those who are for inclusion program, they tend to say that children who are included in the regular education classrooms tend to be more happier and independent and more motivated as they are included in the regular classrooms. And again, mastery of the regular education curriculum, according to these studies, is not necessarily the ultimate goal for their children with disabilities. They are actually put into those or included in those regular classrooms according to these parents because they want their children to acquire certain necessary social and behavioral skills. Again, the results, those who support inclusion are saying learners without disabilities can work as role models for the children with disabilities. So this information is very critical, but it's very scanty in the context of Botswana. The following research question has been used to guide this study. What are the opinions of parents of children with ID on the inclusion of their children into the regular education classrooms? A qualitative research method using a multiple case study design was adopted in this particular study, applying purposive criterion sampling. 6 special education unit classes from 6 public primary schools in the South Central region in Botswana were selected. 2 schools each were selected from urban, semi-urban, and rural locations. The following selection criteria was employed. The school should have a special unit program that has been in operation for at least 3 or more years. It must be a government-funded primary school. The program should also be for learners with intellectual disabilities, and only parents of children who had been in the program for more than 3 years were the ones who were invited to participate in the study. Data was collected at each site in the form of focus group discussions. 6 focus group discussions were conducted with parents. Let me explain how I got the parents. Teachers in the special units were asked to provide me or the researcher with a list of parents whose children were attending in those various special units. And then the researcher selected from that list. So that's why at the end of the day, I came up with these 6 focus group discussions, and all discussions were conducted in Setswana, which is the local language, and audio recorded. Later on, they were transcribed and then translated into English. This is how data was analyzed. Triangulated theory-guided content approach paired with narrative approach or strategy were used to analyze the data. This type of approach helped the researcher to align the analysis to the research and focus group questions. And also it helped the researcher to tap into the voices of the parents. These were the findings. The content analysis approach revealed the demographics of the participants and the severity of the disability, in this particular instance, intellectual disability represented by ID there. So out of 48 parents that participated, only 3 were males. Coincidentally, also, only 3 of the parents had junior secondary school certificate qualification. The rest reported to have primary educational qualifications, which is elementary. The students' demographics indicate that of the 48 parents, each represented a child who had either mild, moderate, or severe intellectual disabilities. Age range of the children was 8 to 23 years, and 25 of them were girls and the rest were boys. Narrative analysis, on the other hand, revealed that parents voiced the notion that inclusion of their children was indecisive. They expressed their experiences with the 2 programs, that is the inclusive education program and the special education unit program, as provided in the schools in Botswana. 5 influential factors, or let me say 4 influential factors, were identified as major themes reflecting the dilemma of the parents in this particular study regarding inclusion of their children. These are the 4 major themes that emerged. Parents' experiences with the 2 programs linked with teacher expertise was identified as a major theme emerging from the narratives. Severity of the disability of the child also linked with the experiences that the parents had had with the 2 programs also had an impact. Age of the learner also linked with the experiences that the parents received from both programs had an influence in the opinions of the parents. Lastly, opinions of parents of children without disabilities also came up as a major theme. Parents' voices varied according to their experiences, like I said, with the 2 programs, as also because they are also linked to teacher expertise. In other words, you are saying parents viewed that what they experienced, for example, if they experience some positive results from the specialized or the unit classrooms, then their opinions tend to be favorable, whereby they were indicating that the teachers in that particular program had some expertise to assist their children, and therefore they are in favor of that particular program. So that is why I'm saying the experiences were linked to the teacher expertise. Severity of the disability, like I've already indicated, also had influences on the voice of the parents, which I've already mentioned that it was also linked to the experiences of the parents. Basically here we are saying, irrespective of the severity of the disability, whether it is mild, moderate, or severe, the parents' opinions tended to be favorable towards a particular program if they have had some positive experiences with that particular program. The same thing applies to age. Age here did not matter as long as there is positive experience in a particular program. So parents of children without ID were voiced as possible opponents of the inclusion program. In other words, parents of children with ID were skeptical about the way in which parents of children without disabilities would actually respond to the inclusion of their children with intellectual disabilities. Now, as in my discussion, unlike other studies where parents' opinions were determined by their level of education and setting, such factors did not seem to have much influence in the parents' ambivalent opinions in this particular study. Generally, the opinions of parents in this study were mainly determined by their experiences with a particular program, which was also linked to teacher expertise. Now, even though issues of age and severity of disability emerged as some of the factors, such factors were linked to the parents' experiences. Thus, the more positive the experiences in a particular program, the more favorable the opinions, and vice versa. For example, where special education teachers in the special education units program were viewed to have the necessary skills and knowledge, the opinions of parents tended to be favorable towards special units than the inclusive education setup, and vice versa. Hence the predicament in this particular study. This is unique to studies conducted. The findings of this particular study are very unique to studies conducted on parental opinions, as most of them show age and severity of a disability as influential factors in parental opinions. However, it resonates the findings of certain studies carried out by the projected researchers where parents were indecisive on their opinions, mainly due to teachers' expertise. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, unlike other studies, parents in this study are not mainly concerned about the physical space, but rather their main concern is about the teachers' competencies, the teachers' skills and knowledge in whatever program they are in, whether they are in the special education unit program or in the inclusive education program or the regular education classroom. Their main concern is, do the teachers produce positive results for their children? Hence the predicament. The voices, ladies and gentlemen, show that, the voices of these parents show that teacher competency is a very key element, and therefore it needs to be interrogated, and training